Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer, founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer, Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, and Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention that there is a do-it-yourself DIY course. So this is a course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regimen. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's HITUNI.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10. Thank you for your support. This episode is brought to you by my former podcast guest, friend, and health and sleep coach, Alex Fergus. Alex is a passionate health and sleep coach and has worked with hundreds of clients from all walks of life to help them transform their body composition, health, and energy level. Alex is an accomplished athlete representing New Zealand in rowing, winning national bodybuilding titles and breaking powerlifting records. He's absolutely ripped and strong as an ox and has won the PaleoFX Real Fit competition 2 years running against some of the most fierce competition around. The first time he won the competition training only 15 minutes per week. Alex attributes much of his success to his pursuit of incremental improvement in every aspect of his health and performance. He's one of the most obsessive biohackers I know, constantly optimizing every aspect of his mind and body for better results. As a former chronically sleep-deprived young adult, Alex pays close attention to his sleep and has invested heavily to optimize his own sleep quality for maximum benefit. Alex has devoted much of his time to researching how to optimize sleep, has been featured on numerous podcasts, and wrote extensively on the subject. He knows his stuff. With that in mind, Alex is giving away a free 4-part sleep improvement series with tips that will revolutionize your sleep quality and help you fall asleep faster to give you more energy, improve body composition, and better all-round well-being. To get access to his free 4-part sleep improvement series, go to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/Alex and sign up now. So I'll say that again. To get a free 4-part sleep improvement series, go to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/Alex and sign up now. What up? Hey guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior. I'm coming at you from my sturdy wooden table in my kitchen on a mild morning, at least for Galway Island. This podcast is my mission to understand how to optimize productivity in health, career, business, and lifestyle. My guests include world record holders, medical physicians, health and fitness giants, underground, rarely interviewed exercise experts, athletes, New York Times bestselling authors, productivity experts, extreme endurance, adventure racers, life hackers, and many more. My next guest is Andrew Short. Alongside his partner Tierney, Andrew is the co-founder of WeFit.ca, a personal training studio based in Ottawa with a unique approach in tailoring training protocols to clients for best results. Andrew is registered with the IART, that stands for International Association of Resistance Trainers, and is dedicated to clinical fitness solutions. After years of overseeing tens of thousands of one-on-one sessions, both Andrew and Tierney decided to branch out to Ottawa and create an all-encompassing proactive approach to wellness, focusing on nutrition, therapeutic, and athletic services. Andrew is a very experienced Master Fitness clinician. He is one of the very few to have achieved Master Fitness clinician status under IART founder Brian D. Johnston. He's also an active competitive natural fitness athlete with the IDFA over the last 7 years. Academically, he was a three-time IART Fitness Clinician of the Year and has contributed a large amount of material to IART, most notably the Zone Training Trilogy, which he co-authored with Brian D. Johnston. Andrew is a charming and very open-minded dude, and we had a very fun conversation about his thoughts on optimal exercise and wellness. So in this podcast, we cover how Andrew got into high-intensity training and got involved with the IART, and how he entered the scene just as there was a tense business split between Mike Mentzer and Brian Johnston. We talk about how his exercise approach with himself and his clients has evolved and his view on what is required to optimize muscular hypertrophy for most individuals. This opens a whole can of worms as we discuss his thoughts about the need for variation in volume, frequency, exercise, and protocol to get better results. We discuss his trail running, we dig into his diet and his view on diet in general, which will surprise you as it did me. We discuss what he's doing for anti-aging and his thoughts on EMFs and how he uses a $7,000 mat to ground himself every day. And much, much more. For all of the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/podcast. And without further ado, please enjoy this podcast with the exercise master, Andrew Short. Okay, so Andrew, thank you for taking the time today to come on to Corporate Warrior. Welcome to the show again.
Great to be here.
I say again because we had a few audio glitches last time, and now we're all set. So pleased that you've come back on. Very excited to talk to you because obviously seen a fair amount of your stuff online, seen on YouTube videos. Really enjoyed the small amount of chat we had last time, and you come very highly recommended. So can we kick off with your background, I suppose? So how your, I guess, journey and career began and how you got interested in exercise and so forth.
Well, sure. I sort of was thinking about, because I've had the second chance here to think about speaking about my background, which is not something that I end up doing a lot because most people aren't interested in, geekery when it comes to Nautilus and that sort of thing. My clients aren't interested anyway. I would say that I don't have a very notable background. What's interesting about me is that when I came into high intensity training, when I found out about Nautilus and Arthur Jones and so forth and so on, it was right at the period when Brian Johnson of the IART fame was in a nasty split with Mike Mentzer. They had partnered up and they had produced a personal training certification. And right as I started to read the Nautilus bulletins, so I'm thinking early 90s here, maybe about 91, I stepped in and found out about the Arthur Jones bulletins, Nautilus and so forth, started monkeying about with exercising in that fashion and joined in what was called the Round Table. In the early days, it was an online discussion forum, similar to Dr. Darden's famous high-intensity discussion forum. And at the time, as I was finding out about high-intensity training, there was this massive sort of split and debate between Brian Johnson and Mike Mentzer about the right and the wrong way to do things, because they were sort of having a business split. And because I got to sort of witness the nasty inner workings of the high intensity community right from the get-go, I became really comfortable with it. I thought this is just the way high intensity training is. We all are pretty rough with each other, like I would be with my lads in the kickboxing gym in the change room and that sort of thing. So I got very comfortable very early on debating online about high intensity training and met a lot of people that way. I did continue to follow the Brian Johnson route of the IART for learning what I know. and steered sort of slowly more and more away from the Mike Mentzer school of thought for high intensity training, which has both helped me and hurt me, because, things have come full circle after all these years, and I sort of try to encompass the full philosophy of high intensity training now. I try not to be exclusatory, but at the time, to get back to the interesting part, the important part of the story, as far as my background goes, is I found very early on to take on the philosophy that Brian put forth, which was an open system versus a lot of high intensity, which is a closed system. So there are a lot of forms of high intensity where there's a system that you learn, you stay inside of, and you apply the principles as they work together inside that system. Brian Johnson was the polar opposite. Brian believed that we should be doing our best to be clinicians, and our certification was actually to be fitness clinicians rather than personal trainers. And what that meant was to keep the system open. So regardless of the person that you trained, we tried best to fit the principles to the individual rather than the individual to the principles. And I'd say that's the main thing that makes me, that's where I stand out in one form or another in the high intensity community. I don't follow closed systems. I follow an open system where the client comes first and the principles are then manipulated and measured and altered relative to the needs of the individual. So that's not because I'm anything special or because I'm better or worse or shouldn't have followed Brian or followed Brian too much or shouldn't have steered away from some of the other teachings out there. It's just because that's when I came into high intensity training, was right during that period when I could see you could choose this way or that way. And I chose to go what suited me better is, maybe it just suits my personality better, but I don't like closed systems. I mean, as we were talking about before, and I think you might have got a kick out of, I'm the first person to say what I don't like and what I do like, but I'm also the first person to say, that's fine for you. I like to use my tools my way. Like, I'm not a particular fan of Med-X equipment, and people always rant and rave that that's crazy. How could I not be a fan of Med-X equipment when I'm such a collector of Nautilus? I have my own opinions because it's an open system. I'm allowed to do what I want. I'm allowed to manipulate the variables as I want. I don't have to follow rules that can't be broken. In my world, as long as you don't injure anybody or defraud anybody, you're doing okay.
Why don't you like Med-X?
Yeah, I know you just love the fact
I had to ask it.
I just find that when I'm training people, and I've trained upwards of 90 sessions a week for many, many years. I find the Med-X equipment not particularly applicable to the kind of clients that gravitate towards me. So I've sort of learned from the business school of things that people who gravitate towards training with me, as opposed to my business partner and my life partner, Tierney, they're a particular type of person, especially if they stick with me year in, year out. They match with my personality and my approach to doing things. It might not be the same for somebody else, but the type of person that matches with me is like me. They like an aggressive exercise. They like an exercise where they can immediately feel the weight on their muscles. They know what they're doing. It's not loading their skeleton and their bones. They don't mind feeling a little bit of awkwardness, a little bit of having to wrestle with the machine a bit. The analogy I give, which is kind of a funny one, but a lot of people might actually relate to it, is guitar. There are guitar players who love their instrument to be extremely easy to play. So very low action, very simple to play, not hard for their fingers to work. The sound of their instrument is perfect and very controlled. And then there's other people who like to wrestle with their instrument. They like it to be tough to play, and it brings more out of their playing as a result. It's the exact same thing with me with equipment. Nautilus equipment can be sort of clunky and aggressive. The cams can be really tough as you move into the fully contracted position, whereas the Med-X machines, with that really low momentum stack, and everything's sort of nice, and there's a little bit of fall off in the action as you get into the contraction, it doesn't immediately lend itself to that stinging feeling to your muscles when you put a lot of weight on. It lends itself to sort of a more smooth build up kind of set where you move in very, very slowly, you pick up the weight, and then you start to develop some fatigue. I find Med-X machines in general develop more muscle burn than Nautilus machines. There's no real let off in them from beginning to end, especially if you do clean turnarounds and you don't rest the weight stack at the bottom. I find they develop a lot of muscle burn, and I've always been anti-muscle burn. I find people will diffuse their isolation on a muscle or even terminate their set a little bit early because of muscle burn. Muscle burn's not fatigue. So I like the Nautilus machines, and I also like techniques where you stop periodically, maybe a 20-second set, stop for a moment, another 20-second set, stop for a moment. A lot of Vince Gironda type training. That's that sort of aggressive approach and avoiding muscle burn, or at least failure because of muscle burn, is sort of the direction that I've always taken. And that's what my clan goes for. Now, Tierney, my business partner, polar opposite. She just got us to buy a couple of Med-X pieces, which are in storage right now, and I'm not in any rush to set up. But she finds with females, she's trained them both on Med-X and on Nautilus and everything in between. And she finds females respond really well to Med-X because it's not as intimidating when they start the set. They can ease into the set, and then there's a little let off at the top of the movements. It seems to appeal to her female clan. She only trains females more than the Nautilus does, where the Nautilus can be a little bit intimidating to women. The men that I train seem to like that. So it's just preference, really.
I suppose you acknowledge that you're probably generalizing, that there are obviously women out there. I'm thinking like, the first thing that comes to mind is that UFC woman, I can't remember her name now, Ronda Rousey, whoever, who might like your approach more, perhaps.
You know what? I don't think that's true. I actually find that rarely do women like their muscles to be pulled on really hard at the beginning of a set. I'm sure there are some, but it's got to have something to do with muscle density, testosterone. The only women that I've trained that prefer an aggressive pull on their muscles from the very beginning of a set right to failure are ones that are taking steroids, or the very, very few that have a very ectomorphic body type, but they like bodybuilding. So, a lot of the toughest guys and toughest gals that we've had in to train, surprisingly enough, they're not tough when it comes to lifting real weight. So they're tough like Ronda Rousey is when they get jacked up and they get out of breath and they get sweaty and they get aggressive and they do things that are in the endurance category. But when it comes to weight, people are very particular. I've had some of the toughest guys set under a weight stack and been shocked how little muscle discomfort they could take as far as pushing towards failure goes. And then I've had people come in that have never lifted a weight before in their life, yet they naturally, maybe it's because of their attitude or the way their body's wired, they can handle a lot of muscle pain when they're training to failure. Athletes, most of the athletes that I've trained, and I've trained pro football players, they can be coached into training to muscular failure with heavy weight, but they don't like it. They don't like feeling weaker during an exercise. They like exercise to pump them up and make them feel temporarily sort of more than they naturally feel, if that makes any sense.
It does. And it's interesting you say that, because I've heard that a number of times, a number of anecdotes where, big muscular sort of bodybuilders or tough guys have gone through HIIT workouts and sort of fallen short of failure because they just can't go there. No, that is really interesting. I wanted
Now,
to.
my partner,
Yeah,
my
go on.
partner, I should say, she'll probably kick my ass when she hears this. The idea that I don't think women like that aggressive feel on their muscle, but I don't. I think the number one problem with weight training in the high intensity community is people cheat. They start lifting during a set, and whatever happens, muscle discomfort, burn, they cheat. They unload to outlying musculature. They brace in the machines. They bring in anything they can skill wise to keep the set going, but they move away from muscle isolation. And that's what I've seen often with women as soon as their muscles really start to feel it.
You're going to get a lot of female pushback on it. I don't think I have that many women listening to my podcast. I could be wrong. I know there's
Maybe
a few.
This will bring them in. Maybe this will bring them in.
Possibly. There's a huge amount of debate that goes on my podcast, on the internet, about, what protocols are optimal for, and let's talk about muscular hypertrophy, because that's what most of us are interested in. Especially the guys that are in these debates, because I think the guys that are very well muscled aren't even in the debate, because they think they already know what works and they're doing that. So in your experience, what have you seen to be the most effective for most people when it comes to developing muscle hypertrophy in terms of volume and frequency and protocol and all of that? And that's a big question, but I'll let you.
So I knew that kind of question is the best one to answer, and to bring up for the first time that I'm on your radio. So I'll answer it two ways. The first way, there's no debating it, and it's why I get along with 90% of the high intensity community. It's simple. If you train safely with as much intensity as you can muster, and you do that consistently over the years, it really doesn't matter how often you train, or what equipment you train on, or whether you use mostly compound movements with a few isolation, or mostly isolation with a few compound. As long as you train with absolutely as much honest intensity as you can muster, but do it safely and consistently over the years, you're going to get most of the gains that you're capable of getting. So it doesn't matter if you train once a week or whether you train 3 times a week. Safely covers the idea that you wouldn't want to overtrain. Now, I know there's always been debate about undertraining, but eventually, over time, over years, you're going to get near your genetic limit. So I believe the real fundamental to high intensity training is simple. You train as hard as you can safely, and you keep at it consistently over the years. Biggest problem I've seen with the layman and the high intensity community is that they don't train consistently over the years. The second way I would answer the question is for that last little 10%. And that's where I get a lot of blowback. I'm a huge fan of variety. I don't believe that there is a best way to train, let's say, for frequency. I don't believe that 3 days a week is better than 1 day a week. And I don't believe that 1 day a week is better than 3 days a week. I believe that if you want to optimize your results for whatever reason, if you're a bodybuilder or you're a hobbyist and you love it and you want to get that last 10% out, you're going to need, in my mind, beyond a shadow of a doubt, after decades of training people, you're going to need to vary all the principles. So you're going to need to vary the amount of volume. You're going to have to train sometimes more often than others. You're going to need to take long breaks and then long periods of no breaks. You're going to need to triple up your volume and then drop it down to nothing. You're going to need variety. And some people are totally on board with me about that. And all we talk about is, hey, try this. Hey, try that. Hey, try this. Hey, I came up with that. Any way to vary things. And other people are completely against it. But just take any individual who's been training on the same equipment for 5 years, 10 years. Like take Fred Hahn. Take him out of his gym and send him down to another one with completely different equipment and make him train there for 3 weeks straight at 3 days a week. He's going to notice the difference right away. There is no way that his body is going to look or feel the same after that 3 weeks. the variety will make a big difference. And I can explain why that is, but if you know just a little bit about motor function and how we write patterns in our body to become efficient, you should already see the need for variety. But it's not necessarily for the bulk of most people's gains. I think that basic high-intensity training will provide the average person in the public with what they're looking for. It's just us nuts on the fringe, the 1% that want that last little 10%, that even need to debate these fine particulars.
But I don't fully understand that. So if you like you are that on that periphery and you want those last gains, why would the variation and in terms of the volume and the exercises and so on make a difference? I understand why you'll become more skillful at those new exercises, but how does that make a difference in terms of inducing more muscle hypertrophy?
So the way I explain it is really, really simple. If you look at the human body, we're pathetically weak. And I tell this to everybody. If you look at humans compared to other species on the planet, we are pathetically weak. I mean, you look at frogs and cats and dogs, and they're so strong relative to their body weight. Humans, we have incredible nervous systems. We have a brain that is incredibly complex to the point where we barely even know how it works. Yet we're physically weak. Our forte is motor control. We have extreme fine motor control. That's why we learn to write and write notes to each other and use fine little tools and make little tools with little tools. So we don't adapt to stress by building muscle and getting strong and building tons of endurance. That's a small adaptation in a human. When you see a human start picking up heavy things, like a really easy example is a power lifter in the Olympics, they start lifting a big heavy weight in a simple fashion up over their head over and over again, and they double and triple the amount that they're lifting. But their body doesn't double and triple in size. Most of the gains that they're making are in the skill of that particular lift. If you give them another lift they've never practiced, they might be stronger than the average person, but they won't be anywhere near as strong as in the lift that they've practiced. So humans adapt through skill. If you put someone into a leg press machine, first, they learn to control their legs in that particular range of motion with the machine. That comes very quickly. Then they start adding weight on and building some strength and some muscle. And then you suddenly see that their legs don't look different week to week, yet they're still adding weight on the machine. Well, they've become accustomed to that particular machine, where the bracing points are, what's the easiest pace to take as they're doing it. It's very, very easy to continually get stronger as far as the weight stack reads through skill. But to actually get your localized tissues, the tissues of your muscles to change, I mean, come on. Look at your arm and take a photograph of it at the beginning of the year. If you've trained for more than a year or two, take a photograph of your arm from all sides at the beginning of the year, then lift your ass off till the end of the year, pumping those arms, then take another photograph on all sides at the end of the year. How much did it actually change? Now look at the weights. You might have started with a couple of particular curling exercises and gone from 40 pounds to 60 or 70 pounds. How are you lifting that extra weight when your arm probably looks very, very similar than it did a year before? I mean, I've seen pictures of all the guys in the high intensity community that debate variety with me. We don't look that different year to year. In fact, in the natural bodybuilding community, it's well known and well accepted that you see a difference in someone's physique over 5-10 years. You know, it's very, very slow to get any new adaptation. And that's usually more about finding out about their body and nutrition and rest and just time. So, you know, when you see these young girls in the Olympics lifting 320 pounds over their head, you know it's not muscle. I mean, they're little 150-pound girls. Like if they got in my machines at work here, they wouldn't lift anywhere near the amount of weight that I do. But there's no way in hell I'm lifting 320 pounds over my head with a barbell. Not without a good 5 years of practice, probably, if ever. I might just not have the bone structure that the girls did. So it's tough. It's tough to put it in a nutshell, but the bottom line is, from what I've read and what I've seen training people, most of the adaptation to strength training is skill. We see very little muscle gain, except initially in the early stages. And it's very much governed by what you were given at birth and what your testosterone levels are and what your nutrition's like there afterwards. That's why bodybuilders are religious about their testosterone levels, women and men. It makes all the difference in the world. There's a lot of stopgaps put in place to keep you from being big and muscular because it's highly inefficient from, the need for rest and food and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I could go on about that for hours.
I get what you're saying, and I agree. So you get the beginner gains, and then it's so marginal after that, and it takes a long time to get even the smallest amount. And Skylar Tanner covered this really well in the 6-Year Itch, I think. Do you remember that article? Did you ever read that?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So
and look at Skylar. Look at Skylar, or look at me. Look at our pictures. I mean, come on. We know more than we need to know about exercise for our own personal health, but we're not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same as you guys in terms of
Skylar and I together aren't Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I must say though, Andrew, you look in fine shape. I've seen your videos. I'm quite impressed.
I try to stay there. It's aging, I'm more of an anti-aging guy now that I'm hitting 50 this year.
Really?
The anti-aging part is pretty darn important.
Well, just on that, Art Devaney's been sweeping the internet with his latest work and presentation.
Yeah, he's great. He's wild.
Yeah, and I don't know why it's taking me so long to look at his stuff, because I've heard Doug talk about Dr. Doug McGuff talk about Art Devaney being his mentor, and I've always thought, I always look up to Doug, so surely I should be looking at his mentors. It only makes sense. And I hadn't done that for some reason, and so all this stuff come out obviously with Art Devaney on the Tim Ferriss show and stuff at PaleoFX, and I watched all of that and listened to his stuff, read one of his essays, found it fascinating. And I've sort of started incorporating his approach into my lifestyle just because it's so simple to do. And that's just eat, intermittent fasting, or at least fasting intuitively, and just eating, 1 or 2 large meals a day. And also kind of following as another guy I follow on Twitter called Sean Baker, who's all about zero carbs. And he just eats like, huge meals of meat, basically. And I've kind of been blending these approaches, and I feel good. I feel like my body composition's really good. I don't feel like I've lost any muscle, eating less frequently. So with that, I wondered, what's your perspective on nutrition and muscle gain? Sorry, I'll let you answer that. I won't.
Yeah, you see, the thing is with a guy like Art, and I don't agree with everything he said, but it's not that you have to agree or disagree with a particular person. What I really like about Art is he takes that open system approach. So when they say, well, what will you have for lunch? Or I'm trying to remember what it was on the Tim Ferriss show, but it really shined through. And he said, well, whatever my wife was making, she would normally make so-and-so. He's keeping the notion that generally what needs to be done, but you don't want to constrain yourself to something that might eventually prove to not be perfect for you, but you also want to have a structure. So you need to look at your life as, what do I want? I need some sleep. I need some food. If you go off in one direction and try to follow some kind of system, theoretically, the system itself of eating might be relatively perfect and almost hard to poke holes in scientifically, but when that applied to the individual, it can all of a sudden fall apart. I mean, I have clients that eat purely ketogenic, intermittent fasting, and they're fairly high level athletes, high performance athletes. 1 meal a day, nothing but a bunch of fat and mild protein. Then I have clients who are the polar opposite. They follow this other doctor who said that the entire problem comes from fats, and all they eat are pure vegan, heavy carbohydrate based. And both clients in both these cases, and I have several of them, are just as healthy as each other. But they've chosen a way of eating that they can do consistently, so they can get a real baseline of whether it's working for them or not. And then they adjust everything around it so it fits with their lifestyle. It's fitting the amount of nutrients that they want. Now, my partner's the big nutrition guru nut. She's very interested in it. I've always found nutrition kind of ugly and messy. You know, we have this big hole in our head, and we put stuff. We put organic material right in there, and we chop it up and we let it go right inside our body. It's just disgusting to me. I've always been of the notion that, like, I'd love us just to have toothpaste tubes and supplements like astronauts. Like, I think the whole nutrition thing, I'm not a foodie. It's sort of disgusting and messy. So I'm not on the side of the fence of eat pure paleo, real food only. And I'm also not on the side of the fence of eat processed food. I just believe that it's a messy business, nutrition, and just like exercise, you need to find out what you can live with. And that means for the next 50 years. It doesn't mean for the next 2 years. What can you live with that you're really going to stick with? And then how does it react with you? So my diet is basically very high carbohydrate, moderate fat, moderate protein. So I don't eat more fat than protein. I don't eat more protein than fat. I keep a relatively high carbohydrate diet because I'm a high energy guy when I'm working. I find when I eat any other way than that, my performance in almost every marker goes down. A few things come up. If I go extreme enough in the high fats or low enough in the carbs with moderate fat, high protein, a few markers do come up. They get manipulated by doing those extremes, but on whole, I don't do as well. So it's been trial or error over the years, but I don't constrain my clients to eat like I do. You know, I'm always in the debate where they ask me, well, what did you have for breakfast? Or what do you eat? How should I eat? And I always warn them, what we've got to find out is, what can you live with? What seems to work best for you? Like, what foods seem to digest well with you? Which foods gives you energy, but which foods make you hungry? There's all kinds of simple signs of whether someone's eating is suiting them or not. You know, organic material, organic vegetables, and clean meats can sound wonderful, but if the person's genetic heritage didn't have a lot of exposure to those particular fruits or vegetables or meats, the person can react poorly to them. And a switch over from red meat that they love to more fowl and fish can be life-changing. And it's simply just genetic heritage, not because either one of the foods were better or worse. It's the same thing with vegetables. There's people that could eat nightshade vegetables and get horrible reactions to them. There's people that can get digestive upset just from the type of grains that they're eating, whereas another person eats those exact type of grains and they react better than ever on them performance-wise. So again, it comes back to the idea that I'm big on what the IRT taught me. It's individuality.
What's I know you mentioned the macronutrient profile of your diet, but what does an average day look like? Like, if you could walk us through like the meals you have in an average day.
So the way I manipulate it for my own betterment is, if I have an active day, so if I know that my schedule is going to require me to work out or play a sport I like, or just be a long day with clients, so I'm on my feet all day, I bring my carbs up in the morning. So I'll have oatmeal at breakfast and I'll have a hell of a lot of it. Same thing, I might sneak in some snacks with carbs and make sure that my lunch is a little heavier, if not sometimes I skip lunch. So I'll make sure that I'll have a heavier lunch than normal. So when I'm having a very active output day, the carbs come up, the calories come up. Very simple. When I know I'm going to have a cerebral day, so I'm at my business meeting Wednesday mornings, my business networking meeting for a couple hours. Then I got to meet some people and talk with them. Then I'm going to work on my blog. Then I'm going to return some emails. It's lighter with the clients, except for the ones that I'm going to be sitting down face-to-face talking to, maybe doing some intakes. So a more sedentary day, I drop my carbs right back. On those days, I'll eat a very paleo breakfast. I'll probably have just a salad at lunch, if not skip it altogether. And I'll end up with a fairly light dinner of just meat and vegetables. So I bring my carbs up when I need them, so that the day after I needed them, I'm not starving. The biggest mistake I see people make in nutrition is they eat a day behind. You know, they're always eating relative to how they felt because of something that happened yesterday and the day before. So if you have a really active day and you don't replenish all that glycogen that day when your muscles need it, you're going to be looking for it in the days following. And it seems to screw up everybody's eating patterns, because eating patterns are very mood based. So that's the only thing I would say that I do organized, that I'm responsible about, is I try to stay on top of energy output. But again, that's easy for me because I already know I perform well on a high carb diet. It would be a little more complicated for someone like my partner. She's more keto. It's a little trickier when you're trying to decide how many more calories to eat on an active day when it's only fat that you're going to add in your diet. You know, the 75-80% fat in your diet it's a little tricky to find something interesting to raise your calories. So I find she tends to take a more even keel approach. And this is an interesting point about nutrition. You can isolate nutrition as a science, but I see this with my partner, who knows more about nutrition than me, because she's into a more keto way of eating, a more paleo way of eating. She's adjusted her lifestyle that way as well. So she doesn't go super high activity and then none the next day. She doesn't book all her clients in 3 or 4 days to give herself a couple of days where she doesn't have many clients. She sort of eats the way, and she schedules her life the way that she likes to eat. Whereas I love carbohydrates and I love getting stuff all done at one time, and then I get bored. So I schedule things in little concentrated pockets. So, you know, chicken or the egg, which is better? The nutrition seems to really work for her, though it's different than my nutrition, and mine seems to work well for me. Is it because we've made it that way? You know, I mean, there's again, it's individual.
It's interesting. It is. I had a question for you, and along what you were just saying, I've completely forgotten it. So I'm going to have to hope that comes back at some point. Oh, that's it. Do you count calories at all?
I used to. So here's my take on the sciencey part of the whole fitness thing. In the beginning, if you're serious about it, especially if you want to be a personal trainer, in the beginning, you should have to do everything long form. So to get an IRT certification, you had to do this big long form case study on your clients. And that meant hundreds of pages of written material, training your client over 3 or 4 months, detailing everything you wanted to do and why you wanted to do it, what you did, what happened, why you made changes. So I counted calories for myself and my clients in detail, just like I carried a stopwatch like everybody else everywhere. And my little stopwatch, I marked everything down by the second, and I did everything long form for many years. Now I don't have to do it anymore. Now I know how much energy I'm getting from the food I eat, and I don't have to carry a stopwatch when I'm training my clients anymore, because I know inherently how much time is going past. So I'd say what I do now, because I did the long form calorie counting in the beginning, what I do now is actually more precise, because energy expenditure has a lot of variables to it. You know, if you get an exciting phone call or you get a bad phone call, that can change your energy expenditure very heavily for the day. Or if you didn't rest well, or you're not resting well that week, or I've got allergies, I've got seasonal allergies, that has a huge effect on how my body fat levels go. So the amount of calories I take in is only one small portion of what my energy levels are going to be like as a result of eating food, because it'll also depend what time did I eat, how much did I eat at what time. So I started out everything long form, broke everything down, counted everything, but looked for patterns. And as I developed the ability to see the patterns in myself, I would see them reoccur. Even when other things were changing, I would see certain patterns that always reoccur. And it becomes almost second nature over time, really. Just like training your clients. You watch your clients long enough, you're not in the fire feeling the discomfort. So you get to know your clients' training patterns very, very easily. You could pull out the stopwatch 1,000 times, but it's not going to change the fact that your clients' patterns are going to come up over and over again. So I try to avoid micromanaging situations once I've developed the skill. If I was to try something new, a new type of diet, I probably would go back initially and count every last little calorie, just because I don't like missing anything. But I think there's a danger, is sort of what I'm kind of hinting at around the corner here. I think there's a danger in getting caught in the numbers. If you give them more meaning than they need to. That's my anti-science-y kind of thing. I'm not a wild man when it comes to training and eating, but I'm also not a super slow type. You know, to pigeonhole them, I'm not a super gotta have every single friggin' number down, because the numbers are objective and they don't lie and they mean more than my gut feeling. Like, I do go by my gut feeling a lot with stuff, and more often than not, it's just pattern recognition. You know, there's no real extra sense there. There's no instinct there. It's just all my senses and my experience coming together with a gut feeling of being able to spot patterns that come up. I'll train one person who looks exactly the same as another person and be able to spot within the first month of training them that one person's going to have to eat 1,000 calories less a day than the other, or they're just going to continually be heavy and not get lean the way they want to, and not have the energy levels they want to. How do I make that guess? I don't know, but I could just see in their energy levels. You know, some people sleep better than others. Some people are happier with their lives than others. Some people are going through major change in their life, and it's an energy drain on them than others. And that's not the type of thing you could quantify in the numbers of calories on a piece of paper.
You mentioned earlier you were quite interested in anti-aging.
Absolutely.
What sort of things are you doing to enhance that and defend against that, I suppose?
You know, it all comes down to stress physiology. I was so lucky to find the IART, and it was originally based in large on a book called The Stress of Life by Dr. Hans Selye. And he's the guy who discovered the syndrome of stress. Stress was just an engineering term before Dr. Selye discovered that the human body reacts in a very general way to stress, regardless of the type of stress. So exercise stress or emotional stress, you get a general reaction inside the body. And as a result of being exposed to that early on in my understandings, I became fascinated with the idea of stress. It's a fascinating concept when you realize that not enough exercise or not enough stress of any type is bad for the human body, but too much is as well. So it's a balance, finding out how much stress you need in your life to maintain that balance. And one thing Selye said that kind of stuck with me early on, and this is when I was in my 20s, so this is going back a few decades, and I wasn't worried about aging at the time, but it always stuck with me that he said he couldn't find anybody who had died of old age. And I don't know if he believed it or not, that the notion that some people are starting to have now, that we don't need to die. You know, it's like we don't need to be weak or skinny just because we were born that way. Technology, you know, we don't need to kill our neighbor and steal their food, and we don't need to find caves to hide away from the rain in anymore. We use our brains and technology to move beyond the limits of what nature offers us. And I find it fascinating, this notion that it's possible not just that humans could be living longer, but that we never really needed to die in the first place, that there's no real reason for us to pass away. So at the very least, it merits serious attention that aging is not what we think it is. You know, the number one reason why most people don't exercise is because they think they're going to get old and die anyway, right? So I think it merits a lot of very serious attention, aging.
Well, that's what Art was saying in, I think in both the Tim Ferriss show and also the Paleo FX, he talks about how they can't, there's no evidence to show that aging is programmed, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's programmed in the sense of evolution. Evolution doesn't work if you don't turn the species over. So evolution has developed basically, could you adapt to the changing environment? And those that adapted the best did the best. But then there's this weird thing where humans just kept getting smarter and smarter, and say a shark just sort of stayed the same forever because its adaptations brought it to a point where it's pretty damn tough regardless of the conditions that happen around it. Whereas humans just seem to get smarter and smarter, because I think at the end of the day, the best adaptation, the adaptation of intelligence, is going to solve the riddle for evolution. You don't need this harshness of evolution, which is programmed in, well, people that don't do well. Get them out of the gene pool. Flip over the next generation. You know, evolution won't work without people flipping it over. But we're sort of at that crossroads now where I think over the next century to the next millennia, we should be moving in a direction of saying, okay, we're done with evolution. We're done with living in the trees. We're done with that harsh way of trying to make peace with nature. Now we should continue to go on and conquer nature. There's no reason for us to die. It's ridiculous.
So what sort of anti-aging things are you doing?
I am, now I'm not a religious person at all, but I am religious about stress. So I'm very careful to look at the whole continuum of my stress load by day, by week, by month, by year. Especially now that I'm hitting 50, I'm really starting to look at the bigger picture, of course, because I want more time. I want at least 50 more years. So what I do is I look at the markers of stress, and that is, how clear am I thinking? How tolerant am I of uncomfortable situations? How interested am I at any given time on learning something new? What's my strength like? What's my sleep like? Is my pee clear? Like, I'm looking at all the markers of stress in my life and trying to make sure to get enough stress, but not too much, to get practice at the things I like to do and get better at them so I feel enrichment, but to try something new often enough that my brain doesn't get stale. So it's kind of hard to put in a nutshell, but anti-aging to me is continually trying to find real balance, real physical, mental, emotional balance. And to do that, you sort of have to have a steadiness inside constant change. You know, it's a continuum, it's a circle, it's not a linear thing. It's more of a circle, it's a continuum. Again, because when you need rest, you've got to get some rest. But if you get too much rest, that's going to work against you as well. You know, if you're sitting on the couch for 3 hours and your kid runs by and bangs into your shin with some stick they're holding, hurts like hell and pisses you off. When you're outside playing on the front lawn with the same kid and they bang your shins with the same stick, you don't even notice it. You don't even feel it. That's how pliable we are as far as stress goes. So I do my best to look at all the different markers, and, you know, the old adage like Bruce Lee there, you know, be water, right? Water can be very hard and resistant, but it can also shape and form and take on forms very, very easily. It's sort of, water's a really good example if you want something sciencey but also artistic to relate to for yourself, you have to be pliable but strong at the same time. So I'm fairly consistent about my sleep, as an example. I've been very, very good about being consistent about my sleep, but every now and again I make sure to get up extra early or go to bed extra late to rock the system a little bit. So I don't believe in complacency of any type whatsoever. I eat relatively the same way all the time. I try to be very, very consistent, but then I won't eat for a while. Then I'll overeat. Then I'll make sure to try something new in my eating. So I get some nutrition stress instead of just like pablum and a bottle all the time, like a baby supposedly getting exactly what I need. Because I think what happens to you short-term stress-wise, and we know this with exercise, is not the same as long-term. You know, the IRT and Brian Johnson came up with this great notion for high-intensity people back in the late 90s called blitzing. Very simple. Just train every other day for 2 weeks. If you've been training once a week or twice a week for 20 minutes at a time with a consolidation routine, then suddenly you train with high volume with exercises you haven't done in a long time every other day for 2 weeks. You know what you're going to see? You're going to see your muscles perk up immediately. So what you can handle stress-wise short-term is not what you can handle long-term, and vice versa. If you eat exactly the same food every single day, eventually some small thing about that food that isn't necessarily the greatest for you is going to get you in 25 years. You'll never see it coming. So I think the key to anti-aging is, first of all, treating yourself like an individual and doing your best to find out what's best for you, but never becoming rigid, never becoming married to any particular idea. Always be willing to learn something new. Always be willing to try something new, if only for the sake of trying something new. Now, I know that's not a very sciencey answer, but there's so many mixed parts to it. I mean, I love the science of telomeres and everything like that. Like I follow all the science of anti-aging, but we know so very, very little, just like we do about the brain. Right now, I think we need to apply sort of a more, I hate to use this term, but more of a horse sense, more of a common sense approach to it, if that helps.
Yeah, I just... Have you read? I wondered. Art Devaney talks a lot about the negative training that he does. So he just focuses on the eccentric part of this resistance training because he says that because it creates stem cells or protects stem cells or something like that. And I wondered, have you looked into the science behind that? And is there any? Because I've not heard that mechanism before when it comes to strength training, if I'm honest.
You know what? Old guys always get into the friggin' eccentric training, and that's because they're no longer so worried about muscle size, and they're not. They don't tend to have the same interests towards muscle building. They're more looking for strength. And when you negative accentuate, let alone negative only training, there are periods that you'll go through where you get a real stimulation from it, where it seems to make you feel stronger in general, because you're taxing an aspect of muscle strength that's not really supposed to be taxed. So you can get a funny reaction from overloading the negative. And when I say funny, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a good reaction. It's like what I said about manipulating my diet. I can do some extreme diet manipulation, like let's say the potato hack. I don't know if you've read about that, where you eat nothing but friggin' plain potatoes for 3 or 4 days. There's a 60-page booklet. You can read the book online. Negative training will give you a funny reaction that you don't necessarily get otherwise, but I think it's because you're not supposed to tax the negative too much. Your extra negative strength is built in for safety. So you don't pick up something really heavy and start climbing up a tree or up the side of a sheer cliff face, and then suddenly you run out of steam and drop it. So you should have the ability to hold your muscle in one position and then allow it to stretch with greater ability than you can concentrically. So I think what happens when you tax the negative, when you focus in on it, you get sort of a panic reaction from the human body, which can be a real waker-upper, especially for an older guy like me or like Art. It can really be a new stress to the system that causes a favorable reaction. But my instinct with that is only short term. And as far as negative training goes in general, I have never seen anyone build muscle at a greater rate by taxing the negative, by working hard in the negative. I think by making sure you load the negative really well, like let's say with those X-Force machines, you could probably keep your frequency and volume relatively low. You know, you're getting a really good high quality set by adding in some extra negative. But again, I think the body will eventually get used to it. And I actually believe if you're not careful, if you keep taxing the negative, it might take 3 months, it might take 3 years, but you're eventually going to overtrain as a result of it. I think it's going to do damage that you're not going to come back from. I'd be very careful with the whole notion of trying to tap into the negative as something extra special.
Interesting. Just going back to stress and anti-aging, which is something I'm 30, but I'm interested in for some strange reason, and I think that's because I'm not growing out of a whole pursuit of muscular hypertrophy and nothing else in my life. So I'm still obviously interested in that, but I just think there is obviously more to life. And I just wondered, do you ever think about things like, you know, Wi-Fi and electromagnetic frequencies and how that can cause free radicals and all this and cause stress in the body? Do you ever think about this stuff?
I'm paranoid. You know, it's funny you should bring that up. And you know what? Every guy that hits about 30 and then they probably at 40 as well, and then at 50, they go through this whole phase of starting to look at stuff differently. When I turned 30, I started thinking about aging. Then I got comfortable with my mindset about it. But then when 40 came up, I started thinking about aging again. And look at me now turning 50 this year. I started thinking about aging again. It's not uncommon that at these milestones, you start to reassess your priorities. You know, should I be paying a little more attention to things that might affect me at 60? And I train a lot of 60-year-olds, and I'm here to tell you, it is a good time for you to start paying attention to the things that are going to affect you at 60, because these 60-year-olds plan on living for another 30 years. And it's pretty tough what they're going through, especially if they haven't done their homework from 30 till now. I am very, and probably because I don't understand electromagnetism as well as I should, I am extremely paranoid about it, to the point where I convinced my business partner and the love of my life to spend money we didn't have in our first year in business here in Ottawa to buy a $7,000 Swedish-based system to sort of help rid you of the effects of it. So here's the problem I see. The human body was designed to be grounded each and every day, multiple times a day. That means skin touching the ground of the earth. And the evidence does show that if you block the natural electromagnetism that the earth provides to the human, there are very negative physical effects. And they've tested this in underground bunkers. They've blocked people from sunlight. They've blocked people from the natural magnetism of the earth. So there are negative effects of not handling electromagnetism properly.
What kind of negative effects?
Well, people just suddenly start to develop flu-like symptoms, lethargia, depression. In other words, the system stops being able to communicate with itself well. Very similar to lack of insulin sensitivity. You know, the transport hormone that's taking all the other stuff around and communicating. When you lack insulin sensitivity, all of a sudden you see anxiety and depression and people who are angry or sad or confused or overly aggressive with testosterone and then suddenly under aggressive. And you see all these communication problems when we lose insulin sensitivity. I think it's the same thing when your body doesn't get grounded. So the system we have actually replaces that effect. And it was studied at length by even people like NASA to see if it would help with bone density, which it does. when you expose yourself to the right type of electromagnetism and ground yourself, you actually get positive benefits from it slowly over time. It's not like drugs or surgery. It's not a miracle cure. But I think that there is going to be a cumulative effect of not being grounded while having our electromagnetic charge influenced by Wi-Fi and all that sort of thing. I don't think the influence is great from power lines or Wi-Fi. I think it is an influence that would only really show up over many, many, many decades. But again, it's increasing the amount of influence. It's doubling and tripling. So at some point, we're probably going to see neurological or some sort of health issues as a result. But you could say the same thing about cars. I mean, the human brain's like a bowl of Jell-O. It's extremely well designed to move forward and stop and wiggle back and forth and side to side. But if you stop it and turn a little bowl of Jell-O very quickly, you get micro tears in the Jell-O. But you get the same thing in the human brain. So just driving around in cars regularly most of your life is likely to be causing damage to the brain and being one of the contributors of dementia. We're seeing a rise in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, and this sort of thing in the human population. And everyone wants to blame preservatives and stuff in food. They go right after nutrition. They're paranoid about it because, again, and there's always all these things. But I think even just driving around in cars will have an effect. But yeah, I'm paranoid about electromagnetism because you can't see it, right?
I think people are going to think you're a little bit mad, but I think it's fascinating. So this this system you've got that you invested in, I don't fully understand how it works. Does it do something to your floor? Do I put an electromagnetic charge?
It is, it's just a mat. It was actually used by the Swedish Olympic team as sort of a replacement for the ice baths, and they found it worked really well, and they worked hard on the algorithms. It's basically a mat that produces a very mild electromagnetic charge, and it's pulsed at a certain rate and a certain waveform to collapse at a certain timing that your body can use the ions that are left over after the magnetic field collapses. So basically, if you see your cells under a microscope, because of the lack of grounding we have as humans nowadays, when your cells discharge energy, when they use up energy, they let out waste products like carbon dioxide. And some of the cells end up negatively charged and some of the cells end up positively charged, and they sort of stick together. So if you look at a lot of your cells under a microscope, you'll see that they tend to glob together, and they're not supposed to. They're supposed to be nice and round and mostly stay away from each other so they can take stuff in and let stuff out efficiently. So if you look at your cells ahead of time and they're all globbed together, then you go on the mat and you set it for, I think it's about 24 minutes. You lay on the mat, you don't feel anything. The little charge does its thing. It releases the ions. Your cells are able to grab onto them and put themselves back to sort of a natural state of zero. Then you look at your cells again under the microscope. You'll see that most of them have gone nice and round again, and they're not all sticking together. Just like a balloon, you rub it on your head, it sticks on the wall. You don't want your cells statically charged negatively and positively near each other, because then they just don't work as well. Now, of course, when it comes to bone density or autism or acne, and there's all these different settings on the machine for this, it's a lot more complicated than that. The strength of the waveform, the shape of the waveform. There's a waveform that's a sawtooth that is a very strong anti-inflammatory, works just as good as ice. Again, the reason why I use it is because I'm going to take a 20-minute power nap anyway. Most days I try to take a little quick power nap, and I spend that time on the bed to rid myself of the effects of electromagnetism, sort of like vitamins in the old day. It's more insurance than anything. I've noticed that my performance across the board, strength, hair growth, skin tone, speed on my trail racing, my clarity of mind, my mood, it's all improved after a year of being on this thing. Could be complete placebo. It's hard to say.
How often do you practice it?
At least 5 days a week. That's the problem with these things. They're expensive. Now, mine's approved by Health Canada as a Class 2 medical device. So it's not like it's a hokey-pokey thing that hasn't been investigated. But it's the type of thing that it's not like medicine. It's not like pills. It's not even like a sports supplement. The effect of it is over the long term. You know, that's where it really proves its greatest benefits.
Can you get similar benefits just like, I suppose, you mentioned obviously there's a number of settings, but can you literally just lie down on the grass outside or walk on the grass barefoot? You know, do you feel like you could get...
I don't know. I've heard
a lot
that's
cheaper.
Called grounding. That's called grounding. I don't know if that... I think the problem is that kind of an effect is something you would need all day, every day, year in, year out. You know, just like this bed doesn't seem to have a very much of an effect unless you use it every single day, pretty much at least 5 days a week. I don't think that just walking on the grass is going to help you. I think if you were walking barefoot on the grass all the time like we used to, then you've got sort of a very similar effect.
That's really interesting because you suddenly made me aware of how little I have walked outside barefoot. I walk around the house barefoot all the time, but obviously that's not the same. You're not standing on the earth, you know.
No, and even
directly.
If you're standing outside, if there's electricity running through the ground around you, you're not getting a natural ground. You'd have to be in the country away from power lines.
Yeah, I remember, it takes you back to because before I moved to Ireland, I was living in London, in the city, in the UK, and you know, I was more extreme version of, you know, the current situation in that walking around in the, you know, kind of suburban environments. But then last August, I went to Croatia with friends, and most beautiful place I've ever seen. And we went on like one of these kind of smaller cruise boats with like 30 or 40 people, and every day at 10, the boat would just stop near some islands, and you just jump off, go for a swim, and then I'd go for a little exploration. I'd climb on an island, and I'd be all just in bathers and, you know, barefoot and just wandering around, and it just felt amazing, just feeling like a caveman. You know? and
well, you've got multiple things happening there, but for sure, you're in your natural environment that you've been removed from.
It felt very like that's how we should be. It felt very natural. Just difficult to obviously live that type of lifestyle regularly, I suppose, but who knows, food for thought, trying to cultivate that.
Food
maybe
for thought is right. I'm paranoid. I'm not a chemtrail guy, you know, the people that are against the chemtrails in the sky, but electromagnetism, when you see what a microwave can do, you know, the guy invented it walking past microwave radiation, and his chocolate bar was melting a bit in his pocket, and he invented a microwave oven. You know, when you see what it can do, I mean, and how technology has blossomed so quickly, I think there's a little cause for concern there. Yeah. Plus, I find good handling of electromagnetism does have the same anti-inflammatory effects as ice. I mean, I think the Olympic team that has used these mats, and a lot of Olympians do use it now, the anti-inflammatory effect alone is worth being connected with.
Do you use cold therapies at all, like ice and cold showers and stuff like that?
I've gone that route, but I found that it's just not something I would stick with. Again, just like I said about nutrition, I've got to do things I can stick with.
Yeah, no, interesting. It's something I keep meaning to do. Because I actually, my last place in London, my shower only went lukewarm. It's the coldest it went. So I used that as my excuse to never have a cold shower. But prior to moving to that flat, I did have a cold shower, and I was doing it once a day. And I do agree that I find it incredibly beneficial. I found it very uplifting. And obviously there's a bunch of other benefits apparently around changing of, well, white adipose tissue to brown, and protein synthesis and various other things. But
and it's stress, right? It's like hot yoga. Right. Hot yoga is huge here in the North America. It's just like polar jumping in the ice and the water. It's a stress at the extreme. So your body has to respond to it and adapt to it, which brings your immune system online and so forth and so on. So you're getting almost a drug-like effect from your own body by stressing it out.
Yeah. It's something I every time I'm stepping in the shower, because I have 2 showers in this apartment I moved into, and you know, they go very cold if I want them to, but I just don't want them to yet. I'm not ready. You talked about your trail running, which I saw some of your pictures and videos about that, and I'd be interested.
Yes.
How long have you been doing that for? And, you know, what's sort of driven you to want to pursue that activity?
I hate exercise, and I find
Really?
if I don't, believe it or not, that's how I gravitated towards high intensity training. I hate exercise. I just, if I don't have a sport of some type that I'm trying to achieve in, it's hard for me to stay motivated to exercise. I used to kickbox, and you've got to stay strong to kickbox. It's the same sort of thing when a more civilized sort of way with trail running. You can get injured easily, whether acutely on the trail because you lose your step, or cumulatively from putting in the miles. So weight training really helps keep your body prepared for it. If I don't have that kind of thing, if I don't have some kind of sport that I enjoy doing, I don't want to put in the weight training. Or I begrudge the weight training. And I find when I have a sport that I enjoy and I'm trying to achieve in, it keeps me on track. I'm a person that needs things to keep me accountable and keep me on track. So I don't even train myself. My partner does all my own personal training. So she tells me what to lift and how much and everything like that. And it's much more effective than when I train myself, because, again, I need to be accountable. I need someone to say, it's time to train again. No, you're not doing that exercise and pumping up your arms for the umpteenth time. You're going to work on your rear delts and so forth and so on. So the trail running, it gives me a reason to eat better, to sleep better, to keep training, to keep active in general. And I've really taken to trail running because, again, when you're out in the forest like that and you get good at moving through the forest very, very efficiently for hours at a time, it feels very natural. It feels very freeing. You can enjoy the great outdoors without feeling exhausted doing it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's something I'm thinking about doing more stuff like that in the near future. Where that time is ticking, and I know you've got other things going on soon. So
yes, got a client coming up.
No problem. We'll do a part 2 at some point if you're up for that.
Absolutely.
There's a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you, but we'll have to wait to the part 2. What's the best way for people to find out more about you, Andrew, and contact you and that type of thing?
I'm easy to get a hold of. It's wefit.ca. So if you remember wefit.ca, that's our website, and you can get hold of me through messaging me on Facebook. I'm very active online. I really like cross communication, whether you want to do it privately or in public or whatever. I'm very open to it, especially if you don't like my ideas or you think I might have a bad idea and you have a reason for that. You have an explanation of something you know about that I might not know about, which is causing me to think the wrong thing. It wouldn't be the first time. So I'm big into cross communication. wefit.ca.
Cool. So for all those listening, to find the links and resources and show notes for this episode and all episodes, please go to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/podcast, and please subscribe on your chosen platform, whether that's iTunes or Overcast or Stitcher, etc. It could just be one subscription for all. I have no idea, but it helps the podcast, and it means that you don't have to think about actually consciously downloading. It automatically downloads to your device. I didn't even script that. That wasn't bad, was it? That was kind of off the cuff.
Not bad at
all. Andrew, I will let you get on with your day, and thank you so much for taking the time today. It's really good. I'm glad that we finally got this to happen. It's been a really fun conversation, and I'll reach out to you to book a part 2 soon.
Thank you, Lawrence.
No worries. Take care.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that. Before you head off, remember to get your free ebook with 6 interviewed transcripts with some of my top guests, including Skylar Tanner, Dr. Doug McGuff, and Bill Day Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health. These transcripts are not verbatim. Instead, they have been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to pick out what you need fast and get results. To get your ebook, head on over to 15minutecorporatewarrior.com/ebook and enter your email address for instant access.